You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Techie Leadership Show. Our guest for today is Kent Graziano, aka the Data Warrior. He is the Chief Technical Evangelist for Snowflake and an award-winning author and speaker in the areas of data modeling, data architecture, and data warehousing. He is an Oracle ACE Director, alumni, Knight of the Oak Table Network, a certified Data Vault Master and Data Vault 2.0 practitioner, CDV P2, an expert solution architect with over 30 years of experience, including more than 25 years designing data warehousing and analytics solutions in multiple industries. Basically, it's safe to say that Kent is an internationally recognized expert in cloud and agile data warehousing. Hello, Kent, and welcome on the show.
Hey, Kent.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Our pleasure.
And tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, let's see. So I've been doing this data stuff for a very, very long time. Though I started off programming in high school. My senior year of high school, myself and my math teacher taught ourselves to program. And I used it. I was taking some advanced science classes. I actually used the programming to do my homework. I wrote programs to solve the universal gas equation and to calculate pH for my advanced chemistry class. So I didn't have to keep doing all the math myself. And that's how I got started. And then in college, that wasn't cheating. Hey, I was going to put it into a calculator anyway. So it just made it much faster.
Automating.
Right? So, that's my automation. Absolutely. And that's been a thing for me through my entire career. I've always gravitated towards automation so we could get more done faster. And that ultimately led me into Agile when Agile came around. And it just made so much sense to me to find ways to do things more efficiently in the data space. I was one of the pioneers talking about doing Agile data and Agile data warehousing and Agile analytics and applying the Agile manifesto in particular to data, because it was done for years in the software world and nobody thought it could be done with data. And now we're finally getting there where people are adopting Agile techniques for big data platforms, right? And building things incrementally because, hey, let's face it, the business world's changed. Things are changing so fast now, right? With all the new technologies, IoT data, everything changes so fast. If we're going to really deliver the value of the data from an analytics and a machine learning and an AI perspective, we've got to be agile as a data team. We can't do it. And I think Snowflake, one of the reasons I got attracted to Snowflake was because to me, it's the ultimate agile data platform, right? No infrastructure, being in the cloud that you just load data, query the data. If you've got a lot of data to load, you can assign more compute to it and boom, it loads. And you need to run a massive query against billions or trillions of rows of data. You can actually do that. I actually heard a guy yesterday say, it's like having $100 million supercomputer at your disposal, except that it didn't cost you $100 million. And that's the kind of the beauty of the cloud, is it allows us to be agile and spin up this great set of resources for what we need when we need it. But you don't have to plan that far ahead. And you can just go, oh, hey, we got a problem to solve. Let's go solve it. And it doesn't cost you $100 million to do it. So that's kind of kept me, I'll say, charged up about the industry over 30 plus years, going from, like I said, just a kind of an scientific application developer. I eventually discovered data and primarily in the Oracle world and said, hey, this is something, dealing with data management. And then I got introduced to data warehousing, working with the father of data warehousing, Bill Inman and Claudia Imhoff. And that was the first book I wrote was with Bill Inman on data warehouse design. And that kind of hooked me. The idea of business intelligence and analytics, I could see that, every business can benefit from this concept of being able to look at the data and really become leaders in their industries and provide the best service to their customers and really drive and build a great business if they can take advantage of all of this data. And over the last 30 years, it's just increased, right? It's just gone crazy. And now we have events like the one we met at Texelvania there to bring people together who are really trying to see, what can we do? What boundary can we push today that we couldn't push last week? And I look at it from my career and go back and say, there's things we're doing today that people literally didn't even dream of a couple of decades ago, right? It just, the sheer volume of data. Like I said, it's like having a supercomputer. Back then, there was Cray computers, and maybe the U.S. Defense Department might have had a big super secret computer they could do a bunch of stuff with. But the rest of us, we could never do that. Now the clouds kind of literally changed everything, right? That we can, just like the internet changed everything several decades ago in the access to information. Now the cloud is giving us this capability to do things with data and share data and process data in ways that we just never would have dreamed of, for that basically any organization can now do it. And you can start a new company with 2 guys in a studio, right?
Oh.
Right? And they can, and you have an idea, you can get started, and you don't have to have $1 million in venture capital to get started. You can start on a very small budget and test out an idea, and then go to something like Texelvania and pitch it to the angel investors and the venture capitalists, and see if somebody likes your idea and will give you a little money to go to the next level. And it's crazy, right? It's just, things have changed so much. It's very exciting.
Of course, they changed. So I always find it amazing that the same people that were taught in school that nature abhors a void are the same people that 40 years ago thought nobody's going to need 8 megabits of storage space.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. That is true. And so we say now we have more memory and compute power in our mobile phones than the biggest corporations had in their data centers and in their computers, 20 years ago, even, right? And like you said, nobody ever thought we would have a use for it when personal computers came out, IBM PCs. It's like, who really needs this? Personal computer? What do you mean? People are going to have computers in their homes? That's nuts. Only the wealthiest people are ever going to do that. And even then, they don't really need it. And now we've got tablets.
Everybody.
We've got mobile devices that do 1,000 times more than those did.
Yeah. And Ken, what I'm really curious, because having your overarching experience, especially being involved in data, and I'm really excited about analyzing how data has shifted or improved like leadership, and how it shaped, and what kind of stories you witnessed where data was crucial, like from a leadership point to make like better decision or improve the leadership style of somebody.
Well, there are so many examples. Like you said, right now, especially, the pandemic is going on, right? And so the access to data about the pandemic is something that's happened within Snowflake in our data marketplace. A company in Hungary, I think they're based, Star Schema, went out and figured out how to collect all of this COVID-19 data from Johns Hopkins University and the CDC in the US, the Italian health authorities, and they were able to take and turn that all into a curated, cleansed data set that was analytics ready and put it up in the cloud via Snowflake. So other customers could get it and use it to make decisions about their companies. And we've had over 2,000 organizations ask for access to that data, and it's free. And so that is, from I'll say a industry leadership perspective, is allowing retail organizations, financial organizations, governments, educational institutions to be leaders in their sectors by getting in front of the pandemic and figuring out how do we forecast, knowing where the hotspots are, how it's going to affect our supply chain. And really, you mentioned, being data-driven, right? Data-driven business decisions. And there's so many of them. It's hard to quantify, right? That we see in the U.S., the state of California put up an entire website to let the citizens of California look at the data themselves, and so they can go and look at their neighborhood and the city they live in and see what's happening here. Yes, okay, we know there's huge numbers across the United States. There's huge numbers across California, but I live in San Diego. I only care about San Diego. And I want to know, do I think it's safe to send my kids back to school? Well, the state of California has made that data available to their citizens for free and built a website around it that we help them with to do that. And it's like, that's leadership, right? It's a different kind of leadership, right, than what we normally think about. But it does take the vision, whether it's the chief data officer at a Fortune 100 company, or it's the governor of a state in the U.S. that says, yes, let's go do this. Let's figure out how to do this and make this information available, because it really, truly can have a very positive effect on the lives of the citizens to make that information available. And so, right now it's as bad as this pandemic is and as constraining as it has been on us personally, from a travel perspective and social perspective and even an economic perspective. There are leaders coming to the forefront in the different industries who are looking at it as an opportunity and looking at the technology and saying, how can we leverage this for the benefit of the people we need to take care of, whether it's our customers, our partners, our citizens.
And that sounds like from the individual perspective, I'm curious, what would be the biggest leadership success story you witnessed personally?
The biggest, man, there's so many. it's hard to pick one out. I like the California one in particular. I think that because it came together so fast that it was a decision. And I think part of good leadership is being willing to make a decision and not debate back and forth. Well, should we do it? Should we do it? You have to consider the risks and you have to consider the rewards, and to be able to very quickly do that cost benefit analysis, that risk benefit analysis, and make a decision and not spend months or years doing that. And so I think, the state of California example, I think is a good one. We have, what else can I come up with? I mean, there's too many. It just boggles my mind sometimes to see some of the things we're doing. We have a podcast that Snowflake runs called Rise of the Data Cloud. And we're up on episode, I think 17 now, where we're talking to all these business leaders, and they're trying to be data driven. And there's some really just great examples there. We're talking to people from different organizations like S&P Global and a few others. And of course, our CEO is on there talking about the opportunities. And I think, as far as personally impacting me, probably the leadership of our CEO at Snowflake, Frank Slootman.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the vision that he had coming in as to what Snowflake could become and how we could serve all of our customers better. And it has been, obviously transformational. We IPO'd 2 weeks ago, became a public company from a startup that in 2012 with two French guys, right? Two French guys in a room with a whiteboard. Is now, we're the largest software IPO in history.
So what would you consider knowing them?
In 8 years.
So what would you consider the secret to their success, their leadership success, to drive the company to be so successful? What have you, knowing them, what would you say it's their secret sauce?
Well, it's really
leadership sauce.
Yeah, from a leadership perspective, and this was even our prior CEO, Bob Muglia, who was running the company when I joined, and his vision is it's always been focused on the customer. And what can we do to improve our customers' businesses and help them become data leaders? And so having that vision, and then behind that, we have our Snowflake values, and customer first is the first value. Integrity always is the second value. And having that and setting it as a corporate culture. And that requires always the culture of an organization comes from its leaders and how they behave. And are their actions consistent with their message? And I've definitely seen that with, certainly Benoit and Thierry are so passionate about helping our customers and building the best platform possible, that they focus all their energy on that. And then having the leadership of Bob and now Frank in how are we going to get this into the market? How are we going to position the company so that we can expand the vision? But it's always coming from this, what's the value to our customers? Any product feature that we're going to introduce, it's always based on business value. And it's an implementation of, we talked about Agile before, on an engineering side of prioritized backlog, right? Looking at how it gets prioritized is from a business perspective. And it's not so much about, there's a lot of cool things you can do with technology, and we're not going to do them just because they're cool. We're going to do it because it delivers business value. And that's how we make our engineering decisions as well, is what's the value to our customers of feature A over feature B, right? And the one with the bigger value, that's the one we work on first. That's why we started in the United States, because you got to start somewhere. And then we went looking around the world to say, where can we go? Where should we go next? And we decided Europe. We're going to go to Europe. So we start with England, and then we move into mainland Europe, and then into the Nordics, and into Eastern Europe, and so on, right? And that's all based on business decisions of, what organizations can we help, right? And where are they? And then let's go there and help them. And so I think that's, obviously had a huge impact on me personally, because I've now been here for almost 5 years now, getting to see this whole growth cycle from a startup in Silicon Valley to now being, a global software company. I'd say there was 100 people in the company when I joined, and now we have well over 2,000 employees and over 3,000 customers around the globe. So
that's some serious growth. And I think it's hard. So when it's a small company, it's easier for the CEO and top management to be closer to the front lines and make sure that your vision and
lead
the
by
values,
example.
yes, and lead by example. But now when it's a company has grown that much, from what you've seen, what would be some changes in the approach that you apply to make sure that you still have the same values, and even if you're growing, you're actually not killing your culture?
Right. And certainly that is a challenge. And I think it was a concern for people, early folks at Snowflake. We have that culture of servant leadership, and we have customers who are doing what we call data for good. Part of the way they're maintaining it is Frank actually sends us an email every Monday morning. Every Monday morning, we get an email from him to the entire company, where he'll talk about our culture. He will talk about, some of the key meetings he had the prior week, and all of his meetings revolve around how we're helping that organization. So he'll relay stories to us about how a particular organization in a particular industry is taking advantage of Snowflake and what it's doing for them and the positive impacts it's having. But then he also uses those opportunities to paint the vision of the future and honestly keep us on task and say, okay, especially now we're a publicly traded company. Great. Now we have to deliver. We have to keep delivering. We've been delivering. Now, not the time to take the foot off the gas. we got to keep going. We got to keep delivering. We got to stick to our values and build the platform that our customers need. And so we do get that every week. We get that every week. And there's, it's a very transparent company with all the executive leadership, where we do have regular check-ins with the different teams that are open for people to attend. They do enablement sessions. We have online training that reminds us of the things we need to do, especially like security, always getting recertified on security protocols, because that is so important for us to be aware of all the security risks, cybersecurity risks. And so we're all trained on that. And that helps us operate even as we've grown bigger, to still operate as a unified organization.
Well, that's good. I like the email part. That's something, and especially having the CEO detail like stuff that he did like the previous week. It's not something that I've heard like until now, and it's an awesome idea. I like it.
It's a great tip. It gives that sort of personal touch. A lot of business leaders, and you see this portrayed in movies, they do that gimmick with "my door is always open," but people get used to that one. But when you're in actual direct contact at the same time,
No, actually, you get to see at least a part of the work that the CEO did, because most of the time you don't get to see like what he does, and he doesn't have to report to you because he just reports to the stakeholders and now the investors.
To the board of directors and people like that.
Yes, and that's like from time to time, and it's not always open. So you as an employee don't really know like, is he working or not? What's happening? Where is he going? Like what ideas? It's harder. So this, like having a weekly email, it's an awesome tip.
Yeah, and he had that open door policy, because when I don't live in Silicon Valley. I actually live outside of Houston, Texas, but I go to our corporate headquarters on a fairly regular basis, again, prior to March. And I've always been able to, if he was in the office and his door was open, I've regularly walked into his office just to talk to him for 5 minutes and see what he's thinking today, anything interesting. And he's always wanting to know what I'm seeing in the field, because I'm doing so much travel, speaking at events, again, like Texylvania, or meeting with prospects or customers in different countries. And so we compare notes, and that's great. Our former CEO, Bob Muglia, was exactly the same way. He was a great mentor to me when I joined Snowflake, and always asking my opinion, particularly about the market. What do I see in the market, and are we going the right direction? Are we doing the right things? That's been a concern consistently through, and I know that comes from our founders, they want to make sure that we're doing the right thing all the time, and it's maintained even through the growth from 100 people to over 2,000 people. That has been consistent, and that's like you said, that's the leadership aspect of it, to making sure we have that kind of an open culture.
And it can't all be like milk and honey. So what is like the biggest leadership failure you had the unfortunate experience of witnessing?
Well, prior to Snowflake, I did a lot of consulting. I was in and out. I've run IT departments, built data warehousing teams in different industries, but I've also been an independent consultant and consulted a lot. And I did have, I'll say the most unfortunate one I had was working for an organization that hired me because of my expertise that you recounted there in my bio. Because they needed to build a new data warehouse. What they had was failing, couldn't scale. They needed to add way more sources, and so they hired me to help them design the new one. And then a couple months in, we had a new person come in that was another technical person, but more on the data integration side, who didn't like the design I was doing, particularly data vault, using the data vault approach. And I was hired specifically because the manager liked the data vault approach. Well, by that point, We had new integration programmer. The manager who hired me had moved on. The VP that I was now reporting to decided he didn't like the approach that I was proposing, that we had been designing all along, and he had no experience in data, but decided that this, for whatever reason, this other guy made more sense than I did, and told us we were not allowed to use my approach. And that was a major fail, because from a leadership perspective, because I believe as a leader, you want to surround yourself with people who can advise you on the things that you don't know. And here we had a situation where I had been brought in specifically to advise them on a best practice and approach to building a successful warehouse. And they chose then to not only ignore my advice, but to instruct the team to take a completely different approach, and instructed me to basically to be quiet and to help them implement this other approach.
And they also had like high churn, because the guy that brought you in left. A developer,
yes,
a new guy, the integration developer, got changed also. So
why? And interestingly, I actually survived the integration guy. He didn't even stay. He was only there for about a year and a half, and he left on to another opportunity on his own. But it was and so that was.
Hung in there.
I even speak about that at some of the conferences. I've spoken about this particular aspect of my career, and say, it's not always about technology, and this is where you get the as you said, a leadership fail, that it became a political situation, and we were making technology and methodology decisions based on politics rather than on what's the proven best approach. And that's, like I said, that's it's a very uncomfortable situation to be in.
It is. And especially the bigger the corporation is, the more politicking is going on.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you have like a lot of experience, like 30 years working with big corporations, because usually big corporation is like data whizzes. So what tips do you have on how to be a good politician inside the corporation?
Well, the number one, and I think I've been saying this for years, is you have to learn to speak the language of the business. You cannot be just a pure technologist. If you're a pure technologist, then you'll be, you won't get a seat at the table, right? You have to be able to be a technology business liaison. And I was very successful at that when I was at HP. I actually had business people tell me that I was the only IT person they'd ever met that they could understand. And they even told me at one point, because we were working on a big master data model, that I understood the business better than they did in their individual groups, that I knew more about the entire business. It was supply chain in particular at HP, that I knew about the breadth of it, and I understood the different aspects of it, and I used business terms. And so when I was talking to them, even just in reviewing the models, they understood the terminology I was using, and that was the key, was really adopting the business terminology. And so I think it's part of that. If you're going to have to deal with the politics and the leadership, part of that is, becoming a champion for them and using their terminology and understanding. And I think this comes from Agile. I learned this really from Agile. It's about building software and building systems that enable the business people to do their jobs effectively. And if you're doing that, then you can have alignment. Right? And that's where they have to be able to see the value in that concept from Agile of delivering working software on a regular basis, right? That's what builds your credibility and trust with the business. But in order to do that, you have to be able to speak their language. You've got to be able to interpret a user story. And when they give you a user story about some problem they're trying to solve, you've got to be able to translate that into the technology, and what's the most efficient technology to use, an approach to use to deliver what they actually need. and to do something in an incremental fashion so that they see the results. And that is going to be the validation for them that you understood what they said, that you didn't, listen to them and go, yeah, I know exactly what you need. And then you go build something that's completely not what they needed, right? At least in Agile, if you're following the methods properly, you only go once. Fail fast, right? You go one sprint, you do the demonstration. They're going, were you in the same meeting with me? I don't think you heard what I said, because that's not even close to what I wanted. And being willing to have that criticism as well is another important feature, is being willing to take that feedback and not be personally offended because you built this really cool thing and they think it's stupid. All right. Well, I think it's stupid because it's not what they need. It may not be stupid, but it doesn't meet the need. And that's your job, is to meet the need. And that goes back to, again, the philosophy at Snowflake of customer first, is we need to meet our customers' needs. We need to meet our customers where they are. And in a big corporation, to me, it's the same thing. You've got to meet the business people where they are. They may not understand data that much. They may not understand the technology that much. And you can help educate them on that aspect of it, but you do need to listen to them.
And you have to listen to them, understand what they're saying, because you understand their terminology, and you can also speak back using their terms. And
Correct.
How big is like the vocabulary of business terms? How many words would you say you will need to learn?
Oh, I have no idea, and it varies by industry. So that's
also
one of the things that I got to see as a data modeler throughout my career, is working in different industries, and working in healthcare, and there's a specific vernacular they use. There's all the things around patients and clinics and diagnostic codes and all these terms, and you have to learn to understand that if you're going to deliver them what they need. In the financial services, same thing. There's a lot of terminology there. So while there's common things across all industries, we all have to deal with people in organizations and various hierarchies, and purchasing and receiving, POs, all of that stuff, from the basic business stuff. There is a limited vocabulary there, and there's some common models for that. But then for the niche that they're in, the particular industry, there is specific terminology. And so every industry you go into, there's going to be new vocabulary, right? Yes. And there'll be a little bit of overlap with some of the other industries on the very basic stuff. But then, and you've got to adopt that vocabulary in order to be able to speak with the business people. So it doesn't do any good to, do a demonstration to a financial person talking about patients and doctors and clinics. Because even though it might conceptually be the same sort of thing, it doesn't make any sense to them. You need to be talking about customers and clients and banks and money exchanges and things that resonate in their industry with their experience. Yeah, because then they're not having to try to translate it in their head.
Yes, and this reminds me of a story. I think it was a lawyer, and he said his secret to getting clients and making sure that his clients were really satisfied is, for example, if he got an industrial manufacturing that was making automotive parts, he would go pick up a couple trade magazines and learn 15 terms from and understand the terms that they're using, the ones that had the most recurrence in the magazines, learn those, and he would go and speak with his clients using those terms and make analogies based on those terms to what he was going to do on the legal side, how he's going to handle their business on the legal side, but using terms from their industry to create metaphors and analogies for his work. And he said, my clients love me because of that, because they understand what I'm doing and the value of my work. And you just reminded me about this. And
it's basically kind of like having your own personal "we speak your language" sign.
Yeah.
That's what it
And
is.
everybody knows that lawyers love to do their cryptic talk.
Oh yeah, legalese.
Their legalese. But if you want to have success, even as a lawyer, you have to use something that you have to adopt the language
Common grounds.
of the people you are serving and working with.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so can you share with us what is your leadership philosophy?
Pretty much what we've been talking about. It's lead by example, but also you realize that your job as a leader is to empower the folks that you're leading, the team that you're leading. And I found that to be very effective when I had led teams in the past. Is I really have felt my job was to enable them to do their jobs better. Right.
So, for example, what would you do?
Well, I had one of the big data warehouses I did a couple of decades ago. I was given a team. Some were volunteers, some weren't, that had no experience in data warehousing. A couple of DBAs, some people who had done some programming, and I found, I had to figure out what was the best way to train them. So some of that was me doing some of the work and showing them and explaining to them what we were doing, laying out the vision for the project, what we're going to do, and how we're going to get there, and being open and saying, well, what do you guys know? What don't you know? What are you interested in? And I didn't know it at the time. I was actually implementing a version of self-organizing teams by working with the members who had been assigned to me to find out what their strengths were and what their interests were, and allowing them to pursue those within the context of the project. And so, figuring out who's most likely to sort of understand data models and who thinks that drawing a data model diagram is kind of cool. Great. Well, that person can become the architect. Who really likes to code? Well, that person became the ETL developer. Who really likes running reports and building reports? Well, that person became the business analyst that worked with the business people to figure out what we needed to deliver, and really working that way, but also sending them to classes and, making sure I had a budget to send them to get the basic training about data warehousing theory. So I don't have to teach it all them myself, and they have some reference materials, letting them buy books. The other thing I did was, one of the things that I've learned is that to be good at something, one of the ways to get really good at something is to teach it. So I encourage them, because someone did this for me early in my career, encourage them to present at conferences. So I would help them craft, what part of this project excites you? Well, can we turn that into a conference paper? And I would help them come up with the title and write the abstract, and then let them go to big conferences and actually present the work we're doing. And that served two purposes. One, actually it's probably more than two. It allowed them to consolidate and really firm up their understanding of what it was they were doing, but it made them more confident in what they were doing. I was going to say that. It gave them this confidence, to stand in front of a couple hundred people and talk about our project and talk about the part of the project they're doing, and be able to then field questions people they've never seen before about, why did you do it this way? Why did you do it that way? It actually built their confidence in our methodology.
Yes.
Because they were able to explain it to people and had see people nodding their heads going, oh, that makes sense. I hadn't thought of that. And so that in turn led to them being fulfilled and them liking their jobs. And really part of Agile is having a motivated team, right? So because in the data space, these are long projects. There's no project, it's a program, right? You're going to go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So they were very motivated. And, that particular team, several of the members have recently retired, and it's been 20 years. So they got put on this team knowing nothing about data and data analytics. And they ended up making that the rest of their career, is working on that central repository, and have now retired from it, including several technology changes in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually talking to them because they're this particular organization is a potential Snowflake customer now, and one of the old managers that I used to work with, who was a young guy like me at the time, is now one of the senior directors, and they're still running the system I designed 20 years later.
Talk about networking.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, but
and so now we're looking at what's the next step? How do we modernize it now? How do we come into the modern age? So I mean,
and
that's
you
really
get to
kind
work
of
on your improve your initial work.
Yeah.
But the
and
thing
it
that
will
I
live on.
find
It will live
Yeah.
on more.
forever.
Forever.
So, but the thing I find most interesting is because I'm also a great supporter of teach to learn. So if you really want to learn something, get to the point where you teach it. But my
Yes.
view was like teach it to other colleagues inside the company, have informal meetings. But your idea of actually going and do a presentation at an event, that's even great because I know what happens, as you said, like after you get off the stage, you're going to get like flocked with people. Some will agree with you, some won't agree with you, and you'll get challenged on all the major stuff you did there and you presented. So it puts you in a situation where you have to see, you either learn that maybe there's a better way because you get convinced that and you learn that, or you become more convinced that yeah, what we're doing is right and it works because you get like it's also exciting.
It is.
Yeah, and it is really. It's also as a leader, part of what you need to do is think about career development for the team that you're working with. And so going to a conference, as you mentioned the word network, it expands their network, and that helps them with their career development. Now, in the case of this team, many people as they met from all sorts of different organizations. They were very happy doing what they were doing and were very successful with it and continued to deliver value for that organization. So they stayed. But other people, might have met someone or seen an organization or seen another talk and said, that's the next step for me. I mean, that's how I found Snowflake. I went to a big data meetup where they presented Snowflake just a few weeks after GA and went, wow. I was an independent consultant and I went, holy cow, this is like a dream come true from an architect perspective. It's like I've been building these data warehouses for decades. This solved so many problems for me. I just very excited, and then started following the company, kept in touch with the presenters, and then eventually saw an opening that looked like a great opportunity and called up the presenter and said, hey, tell me more about this company. Tell me about the leadership. Tell me what, a little more in depth, the non-technical pieces of it, and then decided to go ahead and apply. And the rest, as they say, is history. I got the job, and here I am.
And you're having fun from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yes.
And since we talked a little about you training like people that were just getting started and in their careers, especially in data, you broke them in, so to say, and now they're leaders in their companies. Like, what would be your top leadership tips you have for aspiring leaders?
Well, I think that is one, be a student. So even as a leader, you need mentors. So look in your industry, find people to follow. We have social media now, Twitter and LinkedIn. Find people you look up to in your industry and follow them and read what they write and talk with them at conferences if you get a chance, so that you have a role model to look at, because you have to continue to grow yourself as things change. And two is what I said before, the servant leadership. Realize that you're there. Your best role is helping those people who are following you and empowering them to grow in their careers and in their knowledge. And just, always be networking and always be learning, because things do change, right? If I wasn't open to that, again, I wouldn't be here at Snowflake, right? If I hadn't been willing to go, I spent almost 30 years in the Oracle space and was, as an Oracle ACE director. I was speaking globally on data modeling in the Oracle space and data analytics in the Oracle space. And if I had not been willing to consider an alternative, I wouldn't have had this opportunity. right? So being open to, even though you may think you've got the best thing going, as you said, you may learn
Maybe
from
it's
someone
not.
else, and you've got to be open to that. And to be a leader, you have to be open to change. You have to be willing to push the boundaries in many cases.
Yeah, with how you were viewed back in HP, you could have easily been a lifer and retired from HP. So
Probably so, yes. Probably
nothing
so.
wrong with that if that's what
No.
people motivates. But as you said, that the world is changing at a faster and faster pace, and you just might know even better opportunities might be right around the corner, make you even more
Yes.
fulfilled.
So you have to stay
So,
aware.
and since we've spoke about data so much, I want to ask you about data 1.0, or how I like to put it. What is the book that had the most profound impact on you?
Well, really, I mean, there's a lot, of course, Bill Inman's original book on building the data warehouse, kind of set the stage. But the one that probably had the biggest impact is called The Goal by Eli, I gotta say his name right here, Goldratt. And it's a novelization about the application of the theory of constraints in a manufacturing environment. And I was pointed to that by actually an Oracle DBA. And it was about the method and approach to eliminating bottlenecks in a workflow. And I was able to take that and apply that from an agile perspective to this team that I've been talking about that I mentored. We actually took techniques that I saw in that and applied it to how we operated our data team.
So what would be the number one technique you got from that?
The number one technique I got from that was learning how to identify and eliminate bottlenecks in your process.
How would you identify them? How do you what's like the creep sheet note out?
It's an analysis. It's a systems analysis. It's really a systems analysis at looking at. And this was, again, before I knew a lot about Agile, but it turns out it's an Agile, really an Agile technique, retrospectives, right? That's how you identify the bottlenecks, is you sit down and say, well, what did we do? What took us longer than we thought it should have taken? And is there anything we can do to eliminate that? Maybe it's add automation, maybe it's have a checklist, but figure out, how can we make that piece of the process go faster? And as you figure out where the bottlenecks are in the end-to-end process of delivering what you're trying to deliver, you eventually speed the entire value chain up. In this case, we're talking about it was manufacturing, so the production line, right? So I started thinking about software and data as like a production factory. How can we turn this into more of a factory pipeline? Yes, to deliver new data and new value and new reports on a regular basis. But to do that efficiently, it was about identifying the bottlenecks, and daily stand-ups were the number one. When I talk about Agile data warehousing and Agile data analytics, I tell people, if you do nothing else, do daily stand-ups. And you've got to get everyone on the team to be honest and realize that we succeed or fail as a team. Once you have that, then people can have the daily report and say, yeah, I didn't get this done. Okay, why didn't you get it done? What prevented you from getting that done? And it could be knowledge, it could be skills, or it could be outside interference from something outside the team. And as you can identify those very quickly, then you can make the changes necessary to make the team even more efficient. And ultimately, another book came out years later called The Phoenix Project, which talks about applying the theory of constraints to software. And when I read that, it was like, okay, that's what I was doing. So I did a fairly decent job of interpreting the theory of constraints and adding and using it in a software and data world. And so I recommend people read that. The Goal, it's an easy read and it's very interesting. But it also, from what we talked about before, putting yourself in the place of a business person, That's a great way to do that. That's a great example from a manufacturing perspective. That whole book was written from that perspective of a plant manager, right? But then take that and apply that. And then the next one, of course, is the Phoenix Project. So you would read that. But the goal had the most impact because the Phoenix Project wasn't written until like 10 or 15 years later. So this one was very early on that I read it in early 2000s, like 2001, 2002, somewhere in there, and had a massive impact. And it evolved my concept of agile data warehousing long before people talked about agile data.
And it sounds like, because many people forget, it's important to be involved with the details, but you also have to be able to take a step back and see the whole picture, because you
Yes.
can lose sight of the goal. And that's what you're doing, like with the stand-ups and everything. It's, let's look at it all. Are we still heading in the right direction? And you have to step back to see the bottlenecks. If you're stuck in it, you cannot see that it's a bottleneck.
Yeah,
exactly.
I wanted to ask you, especially for our audience, since you mentioned the daily stand-ups and the importance that they hold, how can you hold a daily stand-up and make sure it doesn't feel like being in a classroom? Okay, kids, what did you have to prepare for today? Jimmy, why didn't you get your homework done? Because a lot of people hate stand-ups because that's exactly how they feel. It brings back bad memories.
Yeah. And again, that's part of the culture of the organization. And so I've found that for Agile and to really take hold, it has to be a organizational effort, and the leadership at the top of the organization have to exhibit that transparency themselves and tell folks, this is how we're going to do it. And it's not about blame. It's about succeeding as a team and working together as a team and helping each other. And that was one of the challenges with that was this is not personal. This is about improving the performance of the team and helping individual team members. Because some of that is, well, you asked me to do something and I really don't know how to do it. Okay, well, you have to be willing to ask for that. And that's how you grow and that's how you learn. So as a leader, being able to impart that concept is very important. And I had people on that team that I led that eventually asked to be removed from the team because they just couldn't cope with that. And they didn't really take to the data thing. They wanted to go back to whatever it was they were doing before. And I said, fine. And I let them transfer. And as a result of that, the team actually became more productive. So I didn't have to because otherwise I was actually micromanaging the people who really didn't get it.
You had bottlenecks.
Want to be part of it. They were part of the bottleneck. And once I got rid of them, and my manager said, are you sure you want to do that? Because you're going to go from, you've got 6 people and now you're only going to have 5. And it's like, yeah, I think it'll work out okay. And sure enough, it did, because then my time was freed up to lead the team rather than manage the individual. And so that it is all about the culture and, and how you lead them.
Exactly. Oh, well, Kent, so much stuff we could go on and talk.
Oh yeah.
Yes, but we're already past the time. So if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
All right. Well, you can find me online. I am on Twitter. It's just Kent Graziano is my handle on Twitter. Obviously, find me on LinkedIn as well. As far as I know, I think I'm the only Kent Graziano on LinkedIn. And if you search for Kent Graziano and Snowflake, you will definitely find me. I have a blog, which is just kentgraziano.com, and that's the Data Warrior blog, though honestly, I'm not keeping that up very much these days because I'm really busy with Snowflake. But I do write blogs. There's some blogs on the Snowflake site that I've written as well. And then, of course, you go to snowflake.com/blog is where the blog is. Snowflake.com/Rise of the Data Cloud for the podcast is another one I would recommend people look at if they want to learn more about data in the cloud and what Snowflake offers and what our customers are seeing, what kind of value they're driving. But, if you follow me on Twitter, I am pushing things all the time on Twitter, pretty much every day. So if you want to keep up on, where I might be speaking, what events, webinars I'm on, things like that, I'm always publishing those on LinkedIn and Twitter primarily.
Great.
Actually, there's so many of them. I was trying to keep a list on my blog, but I kept getting so many. I couldn't keep up with it, honestly. So I had to stop doing that and just go for social media as the way to alert people as to what I'm doing and when I'm doing it.
And we're going to put links in the show notes for all your social media accounts so people can keep track, and also for the other resources you recommended to make it easier for people to track you down and listen to your wise words.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kent, for coming on the show. It's been a true pleasure.
Bye.
Right. Thank you for having me, guys.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.